Let's get started with AWS Lambda. I'm going to do a search here in the AWS Management Console for Lambda, and it will pop up this service. Now, to create a function, it's fairly straightforward. What you need to do is in the console say create function, and you have a few options. You can create one from scratch. You can use a blueprint, which is a good way to learn how to build Lambda functions, or you could even look at serverless app repositories where there's more complex examples. We're going to go through a basic Marco Polo application. So I'm going to start with a simple hello example, and I'll type in Marco Polo 9000. And for the runtime, I'm going to select Python 3.8. And in terms of the permissions here, I don't need to set anything because I won't be doing anything beyond just running some Python code. If later I wanted to call, let's say, the AWS Comprehend API or maybe the image recognition API, I would need to have a different execution role. So let's go ahead and say create function. And once the function's created, the process to test it out is fairly straightforward in that I can build it locally inside of the AWS Lambda console. So let's go down here and scroll down a little bit and take a look at it. Here we go. Here's the latest version. I'm going to click on it. And notice in this overview here, we have this function visualization, and here's the name of my function. If I scroll down, I can actually go and edit the code. So this is the default that they give you, and I'm going to tweak it a little bit to make it run a Marco Polo application. So I will take this out and scroll through here and put in my own code. And what I'm going to say is I'm going to say if the event, and this event here is where you would accept an event from some kind of a trigger. The trigger could be, for example, just calling it from this test interface, or it could be an S3 event, or it could be a web service. But this is really the key for triggering Lambdas, is to listen to an event. So I'm going to go through here and say if the event itself has the word Marco, if the name is equal to Marco, let's go ahead and return back Polo. So we'll return back Polo. But what if it doesn't give me the name Marco? Why don't I do a different return? So I'll put a return statement here that says no, right? So I have some kind of a notification of what's happening. And it might be helpful too to just print this out so we can take a look at what's happening. And I can say, this was the event, and I can put in what that event actually is. There we go. So this is a Python F string. Perfect. So now I've got a really small function here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to deploy. So let's go ahead and deploy this change. And then let's go ahead and test this thing out. So how do I test it? I'm going to click on test, and I'm going to call this Marco, and I'll put in that name parameter. So name, and then I will put in Marco. There we go. Perfect. And now that I've got that, I'm going to invoke it. And notice that when we invoke it, the word Polo shows back up. So great. I've got this full thing working, and in fact, I even can see that print statement that I did earlier. So what we can do is actually do another test event here, and why don't we build another one, and we'll call this one Bob, and let's put in the word Bob and see what happens. So if we go through here and we see Bob, and I invoke that, it'll still work, but notice here that the return statement will be a little bit different, because what's happening is it's returning no, because I told it if it doesn't match the word Marco, return back no. So again, if we go back to this code here and take a look at this, you can see that it's a great way, this kind of Marco Polo function, to get a feel for what's happening. So let's look at a slightly more complex scenario that this code could run in. If you wanted to do more things with this particular function, one of the things that you could do is you could set up a trigger. And the way that you would do this is by essentially going to editing here and going to the function itself, and then adding some kind of a trigger that told it what kind of function to actually build out to do that trigger. So in here, if I go back again to this function visualization, I can go and go to my latest config, and I can say triggers, and I can say add trigger, and I can go through here and put some kind of trigger. It could be a web service, it could be something like Dynamo where I do an event, but or SNS or SQS. In a nutshell, though, the core idea here is that you can go beyond just manually executing the code and set a trigger to do an event-based deployment.